Warning, this review will contain spoilers, so if you haven't seen this film, go watch it first. But if you decide to go on regardless and not heed this warning, it's your own fault, so do not blame me in any capacity. "2013 was quite a seismic year for the Friendship is Magic franchise, as Twilight Sparkle got turned into an Alcorn princess, which some loved, some hated, and of course Equestria Girls started not long afterwards, to some less than stellar fanfare in contrast. Now, every time you have to see something new with a good open sense of mind. So before I tackle this review and the subsequent films that go along with it, I have to understand exactly why this franchise came to being. And, well, to put it bluntly, it's not as difficult as you might think. It's quite simple, really. Hasbro were not content with just shilling brushable ponies onto the masses. They wanted to extend their merchandising stock to dolls to make even more money, obviously because it's a capital-driven world. So turning horses into humans, selling fashion-based dolls and reaping in the profits sounded like a tantalizing prospect for the investors and the stockholders. And by utilizing a film as a major commercial vehicle to appeal to a wider audience, on paper looked to be a winner for those brand executives who were rubbing their hands with glee. However, to start that process, they needed to ensure the film, much like the competitors of the same market like Bratz, Ever After High and Monster High, was not just a straight-up toy advert. It also needed to appeal towards fans of the show that this franchise was spinning off of, as well as those looking for something new to watch as an adult, child, or parent. This inevitably creates a conflict all of its own, and that's quite worrying. That's because it asks a very good question. How does this film balance easy accessibility for non-MLP fans watching for the first time, and bronies who've watched everything from seasons 1 to 3? Because if this film can get that balance right, it'll be really good. But no matter what score I give it, if it doesn't manage to do that, the film will be considered somewhat of a failure in spite of itself. So, with that in mind, it's time for me to tackle what this animated musical extravaganza has to offer. We start off with the story and narrative, establishing this human universe as an alternate dimension, where Sunset Shimmer has taken Twilight's element of harmony, and it's up to Bookhorse to venture into the unknown, get accustomed to the world, and reclaim what is hers. As an immediate premise and conflict, it's a story that doesn't have to try too hard to tell itself to you, especially after the high school setting is revealed. Why take the risk of sending your character alone into a world full of random creatures with interesting conflicts and events aplenty, when you could send her to a relatable location like a school, right? The innocuous setting allows for the world of Equestria that we know and love to take on a more laid-back and playful atmosphere, albeit with the same characters we've seen before, making it not seem as fresh from the start. However, when you've already seen the main six and Bacon Mane in pony form early on, what's the point of spending so much time setting up characters that we're already familiar with the viewer? Why showcase them with very little substance to try to fill in the gaps through the film's entire middle act in the process? Well, this will happen if a film starts in media res directly following on from the finale of an associated TV show. And the sheer laziness of this is quite stark. And speaking of that laziness, it's amplified even more thanks to Megan McCarthy taking some extraordinary story and writing liberties, borrowing plot points directly from the Friendship is Magic pilot, with Fluttershy's timid introduction and love of Spike, Rarity's makeover of Twilight, and Twilight having to overcome a dangerous villain having made friends using the elements of harmony being picked straight from that two-parter. I could say outright that this film is basically a re-airing of the Friendship is Magic pilot all over again, and the amount of nods to the show, from the CMC's Showstoppers song being on fake YouTube, Trixie's cameo, Snips and Snails being lackeys to a villain, and the splattering of name drops and subtle cameos all over the place seemingly pad out a plot that is uncomfortable with stepping out of the show's shadow, and that's just not a good thing. Wasting time with characters already seen and a story already told was not all that this film managed to do wrong, as it inconsistently flip-flopped between tense awkward drama and preppy fun without any real care. And it did that by mostly deconstructing the well-built capable hero trope of Twilight Sparkle for almost every chance it could take. And for me, That is some of the most unbearably cringy stuff this entire franchise, Pony or Not, has ever done, and I hate it as a film watcher when I am left sitting here knowing more than the character I'm watching, because it makes every action they do so much worse. Seriously, it is bemusing how anyone could write a character that painfully just to watch us squirm, thinking we'll get a little chuckle out of it. Not me. And not just that, to make my pain even more pronounced, it went at a snail's pace as well. So, yeah, this film really tried to make it extremely difficult for me to buy into it. The pace was a lumbering hindrance to the film's progress, as by the time all the main characters, the location, and the conflicts were given their spotlights, too much time had been taken up, and by my calculations, it was 40 minutes of a 1 hour and 15 minute feature by the time the story actually started to roll somewhere, which meant a lot of the musical numbers were shoehorned into the final act to rush ahead to the film's climax, which was great in the end, but it wasn't as important as it intended to be. And even the story's own continuity didn't make sense at times because it wasn't fully established. For example, how did Sunset Shimmer know about the coronation of Twilight and the elements of harmony to want to steal them? Why was Spike out in the open so much even though we were threatened with his removal per school rules? That didn't happen. How does that damn portal work in terms of timing, and how did Sunset utilize it outside of the film's immediate timeline to make her actions be justified? And not just that, how the hell can Human Pinky do anything that she does that breaks the laws of physics when they make no technical sense because human science is in effect here? It's mad. This film, as a result, leaves you asking a lot of questions, as I've already highlighted, all of which are not answered, meaning that story is on life support. But thankfully, its managing of multiple minor and overarching conflicts tied the story together, while a late surge of heavily dramatic action saved it from out-and-out flopping, as well as a returning Twilight to her confident best didn't hurt, all while handling Rainbow Dash's introduction much better than the main show ever did by removing her egotism and showing her understanding, loyal nature. As for the writing, utilizing already known characters showcased a lack of depth, especially when Sunset Shimmer and Flash Sentry is all the film had for new additions. Their appearances helped the film flow, but ultimately were restricted to the cliches of the antagonistic mean girl and the kind love interest tropes respectively. They helped Twilight's character progression feel more natural, but were limited by what roles the plot had put them into. As for Bookhorse, the already noted use of her character was rescued as the film went on, albeit with a foul aftertaste, while Spike, surprisingly, was the level-headed and comforting ally that stole the show in almost every scene he was in, becoming one of the more bearable characters as the others fell flat into their one-dimensional statuses. And sure, Sunset Shimmer's restricting of her potential till much later on in the film is understandable, but still feels rather unnecessary. Thankfully, Rebecca Swasey's restrained yet powerful vocal performance, alongside one of the best all-round that Tara Strong has ever done, enabled this to be lively on a vocal front, alongside Rarity, Spike and Pinky, voiced by Tabitha St. Germain, Kathy Westluck and Andrea Libman respectively, filling out the voids, but still leaving a lot to be desired. As you'll be well aware by what I've already highlighted, this film on a constructive and structural front is not doing very well in terms of the story and writing. Now sure, there are some good moments here, and if they are good, they are damn good. But of course they are buried amongst a quagmire of negativity, to which they have a very hard time trying to peek their heads up above the surface. Because that's how bad it smells and looks. The thing is though, while the story and writing may seem a little flat on occasion, or in some places more so than the other, it's not entirely wasted as the messages have the ability to sprout and thrive to try and save what it can from it. On top of that, the style, visually and audibly, is following on not far behind to ensure that this film does have quite a few saving graces. On paper, the morals of leadership and the importance of friendly socializing were quite weak, again feeling like a cut and paste job from existing MLP episodes, but once they were established into the context of the film itself, they rounded out the conflicts of the story resolutely, making their impact even more pronounced. Having Twilight decree the importance of friendship to a crying and mentally broken Sunset was incredibly deep and emotively powerful, while the symbolic recrowning of Twilight following her demeaning rise from ugly duckling to friendship queen made the arduous trek through poor characterization worth every single moment. These messages tied the overriding theme of social acceptance fantastically to a story that was already bruised and scarred, showing how much effort can change perspective when done right. And while it could have been very easy to lay praise on the animation's ambition that it took for this feature, it wasn't all a rousing success despite the efforts that were made to make it bigger than the show that it came from. The title sequence alone was an overload of colours, graphics and silhouettes, while the musical numbers offered some great effects, creative backgrounds and costumes to the point where it all just became too much to handle. And then you have the initial designs of the characters themselves, which were vibrant and varied, taking advantage of what human fashion can offer, with over-the-top and ridiculous facial expressions that only the human face could generate, becoming an immediate favourite, something that the show itself has tacked onto since. And on top of that, Sunset's demonic form was incredible, striking a combination of menace and elegance, while her standard pony and human designs were instantly memorable. And that's true, because I don't call her Bacon Mane for nothing. However, even with all that praise, the animation category is let down by the less than striking backgrounds and settings, which were not as elaborately designed as I expected them to be, making them feel really flat at times. And sure, they do not dampen too much on visuals that were very easy to love, but in contrast, the musical numbers took a lot of time to convince me of their worth, as I did not like them for many years because I am a music snob who didn't like pop for at least 3 seasons before this came through. On top of that, Strange New World was a dud, and the reprises of 2 songs were unneeded and really felt like they were padding on. However, the rest of the songs in this film were the most part great, with the most consistent genre and tone balance of any of the films in this series sonically. The background music even came through all guns blazing early on and at the climax to create atmospheres that really accented the visuals. Sadly though, they didn't retain prevalence over the dull and dry middle act and second half of the film, as characters and interactions took over, making them not feel as important as the sonic overload of the musical numbers became more prominent as we reached that conclusion. So even when its good points are made, an asterisk isn't too far away to deflate the good vibes. This film obviously has some problems, but there are enough good points to balance it out. And as a person who hated this film for many years because I felt it was very uninspired, on analysis though, it has more to it than meets the eye, which allows my perception of it to change, even though it isn't universally positive. Sure, the story and writing leave a lot to be desired while still holding some good points to their names, but it's the style of the visuals, audio, and most importantly the quality of the messages and morals that ensure this film does not fall completely under its structural insecurities, having enough stability to not be a complete and utter disaster. In fact, it's anything but that when you realise that if you can get through the opening 25 minutes, mostly containing some cumbersome Twilight interactions with this new world and characters, what you get is a happy-go-lucky, fun and inoffensive romp that caps itself off quite wonderfully. Sure, it's not the most spectacular film I've ever seen, but it has a lot of heart, making you smile while also questioning what more could come from the series if it was given time to grow. Its premise alone can look flat on immediate inspection, but the film does enough to force its own identity, even if it does struggle to shake the franchise associated with it off its back. And while I will agree that not many risks were taken, that was done for a reason to make it seem as easily accessible and watchable as possible, and overall it's colourful and vibrant, but still needs polish and work to generate the necessary ingredients to take it away from what I believe is sterile mediocrity. And at the end of the day, I never expected that going in, because I believe that my prior hatred would cause a very low rating to be scored. I'm happy that I could see this film's positives and show how well-rounded it is as a whole, despite the fact that it is very far from perfect. On the rebound though, it is as far from perfect as it is from abysmal, and I'm absolutely fine with that. It isn't the out-and-out home run that a first film in a major franchise needs to be, but but it's a solid start that definitely will need its foundations to be worked on in the future if the rest of the catalogue are to better it. Overall, Equestria Girls scored a total of 14 out of 25, which is a C+. So in closing, with all the analysis done, the question I alluded to at the beginning is still unanswered. Has that aforementioned balance been able to work? Sadly, the answer is no, because for people watching for the first time, the nods to the show aren't explained well and they don't make enough sense as far as I'm concerned. And not just that, there are so many questions left unanswered, they're not going to be entirely sure of what is going on. It's not going to feel universally complete. It's not going to be a well thought out, well executed piece of filmmaking as far as they're concerned. They're going to come out of this thinking, it's all colourful, it's nice, but there's nothing more to it. And while the fans of Friendship is Magic, the bronies, will enjoy the nods to episodes, characters, and the show at large, there's one small problem for them as well, in that they'll take their experience with the first full-length feature film of their beloved franchise as a missed opportunity and a disappointment, considering that this had a lot of potential, but was left a lot to be desired. I can say now with hindsight why I hated it for so many years, because my side as both a film watcher and a brony were not compatible with each other here, and I expected more as a fan, surely, but I realise now that its qualities are definitely there as a standalone feature film from a casual and critical perspective. It may not hit all the marks, but it does its best with what it can, and I have to respect it for that. All in all, this is a good barometer for the rest of the Equestria Girls reviews to come, but I do wonder how they're going to match up, as this score may be very, very challenging to beat. I have been Freddie Thomas, you've been people watching, this has been the Equestria Girls film review as part of Equestria Girls Month for the CC Network, and I will see you all next time.